Alright, welcome back to the channel. And today, with WoW Classic Hardcore servers coming out in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking a little about how to choose what class you're going to play in WoW Classic Hardcore. We're going to go over each class a little bit, give some of the advantages and disadvantages of every class and their strengths and weaknesses, and talk about what would be best for you to pick. So if you like this kind of content, be sure to leave me a like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz, and we're just going to jump right into this. So I'm going to start out with the warrior because I think it's going to be a very popular pick. A lot of people will be interested in playing the warrior. Number one, I will say that the warrior is not a beginner-friendly class. It's just not going to be a great one for your first character. Unless you're just really comfortable with this game and this class already, I would not pick warrior. For one thing, they are probably the worst class to level. They're very difficult to level. They are entirely gear dependent. And for another, all of the attacks you get while you're leveling, either your main attack will be Heroic Strike, your main ability, damaging ability that you'll get will be Heroic Strike, which all that does is replace your swing, your weapon swing. But the rest of the abilities that you get, your damaging abilities, you'll get Overpower and Execute. You can't use those at any time. Something specific has to happen for you to be able to use those abilities. Overpower, they have to dodge your attack for you to be able to use that ability. And Execute, you have to get them down below 20% health, I believe it is, before you can use that ability. So level 36 is kind of a milestone for warriors because that's when you get Whirlwind, and that's the first attack you get that doesn't replace your weapon swing that you can use at any time. So that should tell you a lot about the warrior class right there. It's definitely a slow grind. You do have Rend that doesn't share a cooldown with your swing, your weapon swing, but that's just a damage over time ability. So now, that being said, if you can get past that, past them being entirely gear dependent, and that's one of the things about them is when your weapon is brand new and up to par with your level and what you're doing, warrior's going to feel okay, and then 2 to 3 levels later it's going to be a struggle. You're constantly looking for weapon upgrades. But that being said, when it comes to in-game, warriors are one of the strongest classes. They are probably the best, well, not probably, they are the best tanks at in-game. They're going to easily be one of the top DPS classes at in-game without putting out much effort. But going back to the tanking part, it's not a brain dead tanking sort of deal. You actually have to know your class and know what you're doing to be a good warrior tank. So again, not really beginner friendly. Alright, let's take a look at the next class. Let's just start up here with the humans. Alright, so we've got warrior. Let's look at Paladin. Paladin's going to be one of the easier classes to level. They're going to be the same class with the warrior as far as the gear you can wear. Both of them can wear plate. You can tank while you're leveling if you're, just determined to do dungeons. I don't know that I would recommend doing dungeons in hardcore. Just putting your character in the hands of other people is kind of a nightmare. But paladins can tank, heal, or DPS. So a more versatile class. Tanking wise, they're going to have trouble with threat generation at in game. They are faster to level with than a warrior, definitely. Honestly, it's probably one of the easiest classes in WoW Classic to play. Yeah, it is a little mind dead, like brain dead, mind numbing leveling experience. Really, you're just going to be using your seal and your judgment for a long time. I mean, but they can heal themselves, meaning you can keep going more than the warrior. You won't have to sit down and eat as much and drink. So as far as leveling goes, this is an easier class. As far as tanking goes, they're going to be weaker than a warrior tank. You're not going to have quite as much damage mitigation. You're not going to have as good threat generation, but they can do the job. As far as DPS goes, again, you're probably going to fall behind the warrior at in-game, but during the leveling experience, this will be a lot better than the warrior. And then as far as healing goes, yeah, they're probably not the best healers because all of your heals are single target, but they are very mana efficient and very good single target healers. So Paladin, just all around pretty versatile. You can do whatever you want with it at the end game. You can fill in any of the 3 roles in a pinch if you need to. So yeah, it's a pretty decent class for a beginner to pick on playing hardcore. They also have the bubble, and you'll have a stun on a minute cooldown for crowd control that can help get you out of sticky situations. So yeah, that Paladin's a little easier to level with. Alright, let's take a look at the Rogue. The Rogue is going to be an interesting pick. Number one, you do have decent crowd control. Well, I say decent. One of the better crowd controls in the game, in that you're going, as long as you're using stealth, you will have sap. So you can't use that on all targets in the game, but when you can use it, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Later on they will get blind as well, that you can use in combat. You have gouge. I mean, just tons of abilities that the rogue has to make its life easier. You'll have evasion, vanish. Rogues have enough tools to let you survive quite a bit, and with having access to stealth, you're going to be able to pick the fights that you want and avoid the ones that you don't want. So generally not that bad to level. It is a little slower than some other classes, and it's also, very gear dependent, same as the warrior, except you have a lot more tools a lot earlier in the game to help you get out of situations if you need to. You'll have access to poisons as well, and it's just all around a lot better toolkit for leveling and in-game content for a DPS class. The limit is you're not going to be able to tank, but yeah. Alright, so let's go on to the next class, Priest. Priest is honestly probably the best healer in WoW Classic. They are boring to level. Your your rotation for leveling a priest is often just to bubble yourself, Shadow Word Pain, Mind Blast, and then wand the target to death. I mean, it's just like that's your rotation for I don't even know how many levels. I can't remember at what level it becomes more viable to be a shadow, like to use your shadow damaging abilities to level, or it's a long time. The ones will carry you through over half the game probably. Okay, I highly recommend taking tailoring and enchanting with a priest, by the way, because you're so dependent on your wand early on. Uh, they are going to be fairly slow leveling, but again, at in-game content, they are probably the best healers in the game. They have a pretty good kit when it comes to in-game. As well as leveling, you'll have Psychic Screen Fear for crowd control that'll help you get out of situations and sometimes get you into worse situations. But, they've got the bubble that they can heal. They're fairly survivable. You just have to be careful what you're pulling and when. So the priest is, a decent pick, especially if at the end game you're going to be wanting to be a healer or a DPS. Like you can do either with a priest, and as well as they get a unique weapon at end game, which is the staff they get that will work for Shadow Spec or healing. So that's always a plus, just having something extra to do at the end game. Yeah, so that's the priest. All in all, it's a fairly easy choice. It won't be terribly hard to level, but it will be somewhat boring. So next up is the mage. We'll talk about the mage for a minute. The mage is really strong DPS at the end game. You have portals, teleports to all the major cities, which is insanely useful. You can make your own food and water as you're leveling. That'll save you money. I will say early on, like the first 20 levels are fairly boring to level through as a mage, but it does pick up later on. You'll be able to AoE farm if that's what you want to do. If you don't want to go that route and you want to play it safer, the crowd control and the options you get with the mage are, it's like the rogue. You have the tools to survive a lot of stuff. Between polymorph, blink, frost nova, I mean, you have all the tools there to survive a lot of stuff that most other classes won't be able to. As far as control of the fight goes as well, especially if you've picked Frost, you'll have an easy time leveling. This can be one of the faster leveling classes as well. All in all, Mage is a really strong pick, though. There's not many downsides to it, other than you are a glass cannon. If enemies make it to you, and you allow them to stay right on top of you and hit on you the whole time you're trying to cast, you're gonna fail. But other than that, it's a really strong pick. Alright, moving on, we'll go to the Warlock. The Warlock is honestly one of the best levelers in the game. I know a lot of people will say Hunter is, but I don't know that I would agree with that. I think the Warlock is actually easier to play in a lot of respects. You have health stones. Well, I was going to say soul stones, but that won't work in hardcore. But you have health stones, you have your pets. Voidwalker tanking for you while you're leveling is going to be very helpful. You have a lot of damage over time effects. I will say that your life as a warlock will be made infinitely better if you choose tailoring and enchanting for your professions. Mainly, again, for the access to the wands early on. For the same reason as the priest, and to a lesser extent the mage. The wand is going to be a really strong option for a warlock early on. It will make it to where you can put your damage over time effects on a target and then finish them off with your wand, which is going to make it to where you can conserve your mana and move on to the next target. And honestly, the early game wands are better damage per second than any of your abilities, and they don't cost any mana, so you're just going to be able to be pulling target after target after target, just killing them without having to stop. Warlocks also have really good sustain when it comes to questing, because they can life tap and turn their health into mana, which is going to let you keep going longer. At later levels, I say later, it'll be 18 to 20, somewhere in that range, you'll get the spell Drain Life. At that point, you'll be able to spend your mana to regenerate your health, so they can bounce back and forth between which resource they need at the particular time to keep themselves topped off. It's honestly probably one of I would say the best leveling class in the game. Y'all can say what you want about the Hunter. I still think the Warlock is going to be easier. Let's see. They have access to different pets that will gain certain abilities that will help you as you're leveling. You'll gain the ability to sacrifice your Voidwalker to put a shield around you if you get in a bad situation, so that hopefully you can run away. They have Fear for crowd control. They have their second pet or third pet that they get access to is the Succubus, which will have some crowd control that you'll gain access to with that pet. Seduction, I believe, is the name of it, where you'll be able to crowd control one target while you kill another. It does take some juggling, and it does take some getting used to, but once you get used to the class, I really do feel like they're even stronger than the Hunter when it comes to leveling, because you're not as gear dependent. Alright, so we've talked about the Warlock. What's the downside of the Warlock? I guess the only downside I can really think of for the Warlock is that you can only DPS with it. Well, I mean, there is actually a tank build you could run. But no, we're not even going to talk about that. So, moving on. Next, we're going to talk about the Hunter. Now, the reason I say, one of the main reasons I say the Warlock is better than the Hunter for leveling is that as you're leveling a Hunter, your pet abilities, you have to go out, you have to find out what ability you want for your pet, and every few levels go get the next rank of that ability by taming specific animals throughout the world to gain access to those abilities. And it's kind of a pain to figure out where and which animals you need to get to do that. It's kind of an advanced part of the Hunter. Now you will be able to upgrade like your pet abilities like Growl and their passive abilities that you'll be able to train at the pet trainers. So it's not as big of a deal, but if you want to get the most out of your hunter pets, you kind of have to do a bit of traveling to go train those pets. Another downside of, going back to the Warlock, one of the downsides of the Warlock is soul stones. Or, no, soul shards. Yeah, soul shards. You have to keep soul shards in your bags. Same with the Hunter. One of the biggest downsides of the Hunter is you have to carry ammunition for your ranged weapons. So, yeah, that's literally the worst thing about those two classes, is that you're using bag space for things that, you don't actually need with other classes. So that's about the only downside of the Hunter. Well, there is one more downside of the Hunter. You don't get your pet until level 10. So until you reach level 10, you are a ranged class, primarily a ranged class, that can't keep enemies at range. So to get from 1 to 10, you're going to be using a mix of ranged abilities and your melee abilities to kill things, and it's honestly kind of a pain. But at level 10, you get your pet and you become one of the fastest leveling classes in the game. They're really strong. Again, this is a class that has a lot of tools to meet a lot of different situations. You're going to have crowd control in your traps, although as you're leveling, the duration of that crowd control isn't great. But you're going to have the pet to tank for you. That's going to make almost every fight way easier. I can't remember what level it is exactly that you get Feigned Death, but that's also going to possibly save you from a lot of situations. Yeah, that you just have a lot of tools available for you, and especially against Beast. You're going to have a lot more crowd control in you'll have a fear for beasts, and honestly, this class just has a lot of potential. It is a fairly beginner friendly class, assuming you can make it to level 10. But the learning curve for Hunter is, there's a difference between playing a Hunter and playing a Hunter well, and the learning curve for that is kind of steep. It It's probably the second hardest class to play well in WoW Classic, and I say play well behind the warrior. But I feel like almost anyone could pick up the hunter and make it to level 60 as long as you're fairly careful. Yeah, that just all around a really strong class. It's definitely going to be a solid choice for you to pick if you're trying to get a character to level 60 in hardcore. Okay, next up is Druid. We'll talk about them a little bit. So the Druid is going to be one of the best levelers in the game, honestly. I will say that the Druid is not fun leveling from 1 to 10, but you know, honestly, it's the shortest levels in the game, and that's all you have to get through. So you're stuck in your caster form for your first 10 levels, and then at level 10 you'll get access to bear form. Bear form is going to speed you up significantly just because you can fight mobs in bear form. When you get low health, drop into caster form, heal yourself up, shift back into bear form, and continue fighting while your mana is regenerating while you're in bear form. So by the time you need to drop back into your caster form to heal up, you have full mana again. Then at level 20, you're going to get access to cat form, which is going to speed you up even more, just from being a higher DPS from the cat form, meaning you're going to kill enemies faster. You're going to take more damage in cat form, but again, shifting back and healing yourself and then right back into cat form, it's not really a problem. Then at level 30, you're going to get access to travel form, which will speed you up even more. Honestly, it's, you know, it's one of the fastest leveling classes after you get to level 10 and after you get to level 20. Before that, it can be kind of painful. However, you know, as far as leveling goes, it is one of the best. So, at end game, the Druid, well, even while leveling, the Druid is one of the it is the most versatile class in the game, in that you can heal, you can tank, you can be a melee DPS or a ranged DPS. So there's plenty of options to choose from to fit your playstyle. I will say that for leveling, the ranged DPS caster Moonkin form is not the way to go, just because you're going to be quite a bit slower just from having to stop and drink. Healers, they are really good healers at the end game with their heal over time abilities. As far as the tanking goes, they are, you know, adequate if you plan on doing dungeons. And honestly, they're so much easier to level than warriors that, yeah, I would just soon play a druid. But yeah, you're going to have access to stealth with the cat form, meaning you can avoid the more dangerous fights and choose which fights you want to get in a little easier. As well as having dash to get away from fights if you need to. Honestly, Druid is just a really strong pick for leveling. It'll be one of the fastest to get you to level 60. Alright, so that being done, we'll move on to our last class, which is the Shaman. In the same way that the Paladin is alliance only, the Shaman is only for the Horde in Classic. Yeah, the Shaman's going to be a fairly strong pick as well, in that you get access to the totems, which are kind of a pain to use, but they are definitely powerful. You can tank, in some instances, you can tank lower level content. I don't recommend it. But they are really good DPS and healers, so at the end game you do have some versatility from playing a Shaman. As well as their DPS classes, or specs. You can be a ranged DPS or a melee DPS, depending on what you're more comfortable with. They are fairly fast levelers as well. You get Ghost Wolf at level 20, I believe, which is going to speed you up significantly. Yeah, that you have healing spells. You're going to be able to heal yourself in between fights and keep going. They are fairly a little slower than some of the other classes because you will have to spend a lot of your time drinking in between fights, but I mean, yeah, honestly, they're fairly strong. The only really bad part about the Shaman is their crowd control is a little weak. It is, you do have some in you have a couple of totems that help for crowd control. They're kind of clunky to use, but it is there. You'll have Frost Shock for a slow, but other than that, I mean that's about it as you're leveling. So definitely one of the I'd put it mid pack between all the classes as far as how easy it is to level. It's a strong class to pick, definitely, and in game they are a lot of fun. You'll be able to do really well on DPS, and as far as healing goes, it's a fairly strong choice as well with chain heal. So yeah, honestly, it's one of the classes that's harder to master though. With the totems, you really have to get comfortable with the class before you can get the most out of it. So that's pretty much all the classes, I believe. I think we went over everything. Um, I'd really love to hear from everybody. Tell me what classes you plan on playing in the hardcore servers, if you plan on playing the hardcore servers. Let me know what your favorite class is. That's all I've got for you today, though. I just wanted to give a little bit of a highlight for each class. I plan on doing some more in-depth guides for each class later on. Yeah, I'll have to get into that. Specifically targeting, how the easiest way to level as each class, but I haven't got to that yet. We'll be looking for those in the future. Be sure to leave me a like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think, and let me know if I missed anything, and I'll catch you in the next one.